Hello, flat earth researchers, debaters and debunkers. This is my first video since taking part in the sun tracking event organised by Nathan Oakley on July the 3rd. So well done to all the people that helped organise that, and it was great to see so many people taking part and anxious to contribute. And this has been kind of a step forward in a way, simply for people getting together and collaborating as individuals for in an open-minded way to really see what results can be achieved. And my wife was asking me the other day, she's Thai, and so she was asking me about how things went on the weekend doing the sun tracking. And we were talking about this, or these possible scenarios, and I'm strongly leaning towards the idea that what we see really does come down to personal perspective, and it might be very difficult to ascertain any clearer picture of how the sun would be if we weren't here to see it. Now, maybe this is an opportunity to talk about coming to a new culture and learning from that in so many different ways. My wife, who I didn't meet in a bar, is very down to earth, and there's a few interesting things about how she sees the world that are obviously a personal perspective at the end of the day, but also something that may be tied into someone being of no particular religious persuasion apart from being brought up in a Buddhist culture, and this really has no doctrine or leader even, or a book that one must obey. It is more about the science of the mind and just getting along, following the middle path. So there are no extremes there, and there's no persuasion to think or believe that things are any particular way other than how we experience them. She comes from landlocked Isan, had never seen the sea until we came down to the coast. But she's always had a vision since she was a kid of water cascading down, washing the world. Never ever been exposed to any form of Christianity, and lived a fairly kind of, like I say, down to earth existence, without much in the way of technology, even electricity, for a large part of her childhood. And so, I've said it before, but it's worth saying again that Thais in general, or Buddhists, or even maybe Asians and people of various Asian or faiths really don't place any importance on the shape of the earth having any meaning to our existence. And these crazy reactions from people who very much believe in the science of going into space was one major reason for investigating flat Earth further, because it felt like, yes, the religious attachment to the globe was quite a zealous one, to my surprise. But of course I was looking at that from the perspective of someone who'd already spent many, many years here in Thailand. And I came here when I was young, and I've now spent more than half my life here. So after growing up in the UK, so that in itself has been a long journey of self-education, adapting. You know, it maybe takes 10 years to even get close to beginning to understand the culture one has tried desperately to assimilate into. There's no substitute for being born into and raised in a culture, because that really you can't really revisit that once you've grown up, and you don't deal with that same kind of discovery that an infant has. Then there are many, many things that you just will never ever be able to relate to about another culture. So yeah, of course, the older we get, the more set in our ways we become, and the more difficult it can be to adapt to a new culture. But even so, when I came here at a young age, I'm saying it took a very long time to adapt, and you can compare that to just adapting to a new way of thinking, a new way of leading one's life, to, okay, ultimately to fit in, but of course it's one of those things where if you try and fight the culture and impress your own culture on the foreign culture that you're in, then you're fighting a losing battle. There's no grace in that at all. And so, but you know, we Westerners really are raised with this kind of mightier than thou attitude. Well, maybe many cultures are guilty of that, but you compare that to the Thai culture, and they know they're different, but they don't claim any superiority over anyone really. There's some animosity sometimes between some of the neighbouring countries because of very violent pasts, and it's very difficult to know the true history of the region. But either way, the Thais live in the moment, live in the now. That doesn't mean they don't prepare, and it doesn't mean they don't think about things that, it's just they're aware of their reactions to things, whereas the Westerner often isn't aware of how he might be reacting or how others might be seeing him or her in a certain situation. And just from my own personal experience coming to Thailand and being a newbie from the Western culture, the modern Western culture, I felt somewhat superior, and you have this impression of yourself that you know how to go about doing things the right way. There's a right way and there's a wrong way. It's kind of black and white, and So even when you come to a new culture prepared in your mind to learn and adapt and integrate, the baggage that you bring with you is very, very difficult to let go of, even though that baggage weighs you down. Your own culture can weigh you down. Terence McKenna once said, culture is not your friend. Absolutely right. It doesn't matter which culture you come from, no matter how nice or bad it might be, it is something that forms our very thoughts and opinions and is set almost in concrete at a young age, and it's very, very, very difficult to break out of. And that's what happens with flat earthers. For those of you who are watching this and not getting the whole flat earth thing, flat earthers seem to be people that have been searching, soul searching for more answers to life's fundamental questions than science can give. And there's also, after looking into this and that, conspiracy theory, and seeing how conniving and tricky certain people can be, and trying to get a grip on the extent of the mess that the human population is in and how we got here. It leaves you just thirsting for more and more answers, and you feel there must be some kind of ultimate answer, like the scientist trying to put the universe into a single equation. But there isn't an answer to some of those things, like, why are we here? What are the sun, the moon, and the stars? How do they work? Personally, for me, once I started looking into flat Earth, I could see that science had, or the Renaissance period of science and discovery had kind of got people believing that because they could work out the laws of motion and friction and things like that on the Earth, they could then apply that to space and then appear to have the answers to those fundamental questions. Here, look, we can tell you how it all works, but it still never explains why. In fact, looking at a brief history of time again, after about another 20 years, it's a lot easier to see how, it's actually a very well written book in the way, and maybe quite revolutionary at the time, where it doesn't really use mathematical formula to explain things, but explains how the whole idea of time, there being a beginning and an end, came about in science when observing space, the universe, etc. There came a point where stars were considered heavy objects which should fall or collapse. There was this idea that things just couldn't be permanently hanging or suspended or just in a point in space. There had to be some kind of beginning, middle and end to them being there. So we have an entire branch of science, basically the science and mathematics, which attempts to describe our very existence, the hows and whys of us being here. That started with this idea that things can't just hang about, they must fall or fall into each other or fall, everything must be moving or falling. It would be impossible to have things just suspended in space. So there we have a whole branch of science that has started on a premise that everything must be falling, moving, because it just can't be suspended there. And with this idea that then the falling means that there is time. And so these things have a beginning and an end at some point, no matter whether that's millions or billions of years. So it's all been built on that, really, and the attempts to round it all off into an equation. And of course, that's an impossibility to do, and maybe that is the case with flat Earth and looking at the sun and the moon. It's and the stars. At some point, do we come back to that realization that no matter how hard we look, how hard we try and work it out, maybe we can't because we're not supposed to. It's however it works and how wonderful it is. Certainly isn't to belittle it, but it's a clock. It's a clock in the sky. And we are in one big bioelectrical time machine. This whole idea of going backwards and forwards in time and changing history, no, you don't change history by going back. That moment's gone, and then there is no future, there is only now. Labeling times and dates and days and things is really kind of futile and puts us in a certain mindset of wanting things or expecting time to be linear. I think this is another difference between the kind of Asian way of thinking and the Western concept. That, and again, this stems from this desire in science to say that things have a beginning, middle and end. So therefore we get this idea of linear time, whereas well, certainly Buddhist culture considers time to be infinite and cyclical. And we do that with our clocks. You know, we have a close approximation of how a day passes with our clocks. But of course, you can tell the time by where the hands of the clock are. But it's still just a figment of our imagination, especially when, for example, we have the sun at its zenith. In certain places it might be 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, that means that the artificial time construct that we have had imposed upon us does not relate to the way the sun and the moon travel, or even if you want to consider the ball Earth travelling around the sun, our time-keeping, our own artificial way of keeping time, has no real relation to the natural timing of the sun and the moon and the stars. It's all off. But of course, having things in a nice, neat circle of 360 degrees, it's that magic number that you can play with, and of course you break it up into the months and the days quite nicely when you have 360 degrees. So again, you know, the passage of time that we're seeing in the sky, however it works, whatever the mechanics are of it, heliocentric, geocentric, whatever, what we're attempting to do is simply record the passage of time which is already being done by the stars and the sun and the moon. But the way we represent it is one that, okay, works for commerce and for many, many reasons. I'm not saying we should abolish it, but proving the ball often comes down to the fact that you cannot escape the mathematics that will formulate a 360-degree circle. And so every variant of that is going to bring you back to this 360 degrees. So this seems to answer all the questions. But again, just like the clock on the wall, which is telling us the time, we can't actually see time. And although we age as a kind of process of time, it's the one thing that we have. It's why and how it all works, because for anything to exist, there needs to be a time and a place in which for it to exist. So regardless of whether you consider there being a Big Bang, a sudden thunderclap of creation, or a gradual evolutionary process, what we have is something from nothing. And however or whoever or whatever brought that something into existence from nothing is everything and nothing at the same time. And each one of us is having our individual perspective on behalf of the collective conscious. Maybe consciousness was bored with being all-knowing, all-seeing, everything and nothing at the same time, so requires a time machine in which to have existence and experience duality, the good and the bad. Sure, there's an awakening going on, but there's always an awakening going on, and there's always a suppression going on, and there's always good and evil going on. It's just the way things are, it's the way they have to be. What we have, though, unless circumstances really seem to be beyond our control, but what we have is that personal choice, and we do have free will, but not because a government says we have free will or a democracy says that we have it. We have free will to make decisions for our own, the betterment of our own spirit and well-being every moment of the day. We can, if we choose to, and we should choose to, stop and think about every thought that passes through our heads, or every emotion that becomes attached to every reaction that we have to certain situations and certain people, and we learn from our own reactions, we learn about ourselves. And this is what the science of Buddhism is to just, the science of it is getting into the habit of catching your thoughts, and or at least examining, realizing and understanding that when you have an outburst, whether it's a happy one or a sad one or an angry one, you for a fleeting moment you had a choice whether you were going to let that emotion override you or have control of you. So you see, in the Thai culture, it's very difficult to understand this concept, but if you get angry at someone, even if you are in the right and that person is in the wrong, if undoubtedly, you can, by getting angry, you lose face. Whereas the Western mentality is to often to shout, point fingers, blame, be a firm, stern talker, say your piece, give people a piece of your mind, put them in their place, take them down a peg or two, what have you. This is the kind of prevailing attitude that a Westerner might have about how the world should suit him or her. But that kind of attitude here, or showing that kind of attitude here, is a huge loss of face. But the irony is that if you wouldn't, as a Westerner or as a stranger to the culture, you wouldn't realise that yourself. You wouldn't realise that you'd lost face by getting angry. Okay, people would end up, they'd feel bad and they'd end up doing what you wanted them to do and things like that, but the point is that you lost your cool, and so it means, if you get angry or you flare up, you lost control of the things they teach you from when you're a kid, and that's to be aware and therefore be able to control your emotions. And it's interesting how Asians will often talk about themselves in the third person. There seems to be this intrinsic awareness that they're a spirit in a body, the body has a name, so it's kind of, automatically people are analysing themselves and their own reactions simply by referring to themselves in the third person. It gives you a kind of abstract view of yourself, and it's very healthy to have that.
What is this?
Oh, that's a remote for the camera.
Why don't you do remote?
So I can turn it on and off. So, the rain's starting up now. Back to the sun tracking, and Not sure if you're going to be able to hear me over the rain. We'll give it a go. And my wife's talking to my wife about how the sun tracking event went, and the idea that we might end up having a less distinct picture of the sun's path, but more of a jumbled picture of just people seeing the sun from their perspective. So that's a good thing, even if it becomes more mysterious. That's great because it's got people thinking about it. And but ultimately, whether we are able to work out how it all works and the how and why of the mechanics, we probably will never be able to do that. And here I am trying to battle nature. So I'm talking to my wife about this, and she said, well look, everything's it's just the way we as human beings see our surroundings. The how, why, wherefores are not really of our concern. Just to know that everything has a job to do. A plant or an insect knows what it has to do. The sun, the moon, and the stars are doing their jobs. Whatever those jobs may be, they have a job to do. And the same can be said for us. Each of us has a job to do. Not everyone will be converted to flat earth, but those people, everyone, no matter what their faith, belief, has some kind of job to do here. But we also have the ability to make of it what we will. And so no matter how you see the shape of the world, or how movement of celestial objects dictates what we're all doing here, the only thing I can think we are supposed to make of it is to understand that our time here is something to learn from. Just by simply having the experience and the ability to have a unique perspective